Let's move on to the second theory, segmented market theory. Let's see if the segmented market theory can explain the term structure of the interest rate, the three different facts. So in the segmented market theory, there are two types of the bond. One is a short-term bond, versus long-term bond. Because this theory assumes these two markets are separated, so we can actually draw the supply and the demand curve for the bond. Yeah, you should be very familiar with this process, the model here. Supply curve and the demand curve. So that's initial price. Again, we can assume these two bonds has the same initial price, P0. This is short-term bond, I use S. That's a long-term bond, I use L. That's S. That's demand. Okay. Yeah, you can also show the equilibrium quantity here. So what caused the difference between the interest rate of these two bonds? Yeah, if you compare short-term bond with the long-term bond, first question you can ask, which bond tend to have a high liquidity? Liquidity means how fast the asset can be converted into the cash. Based on the time to maturity, and you probably can guess the short-term bonds is more liquid because the year to mature is smaller than long-term bond, so high liquidity. Long-term bond has a low liquidity because the longer terms. So how can liquidity affect the supply and the demand? Recall, liquidity is one of the factors that affect the demand side. For the asset with high liquidity, it will be more attractive to the investors. As a result, the demand for the short-term bond will go up. But for the long-term bond, because of the low liquidity, not many investors want to buy long-term bond, so demand will drop. In addition, both the short-term bond and the long-term bond face a certain risk. If you remember, bond face the interest rate risk. Both face the interest rate risk. What's the meaning of the interest rate risk? Interest rate risk means if the interest rate in the market increases, the price of the bond will drop. But which bond tend to have a higher interest rate risk? If you remember what we learned previously, the long-term bonds has higher interest rate risk because once the interest rate in the market increases, the price of the long-term bond will drop more than the price of the short-term bond. So long-term bond have high interest risk, short-term bond has a low interest risk. And then comes the question, how the risk affect the supply and the demand of the bonds market. And the risk is the one of the factors that affect the demand side. Because of the short-term bond has a lower interest risk, demand for this bond will increase because the people or investors dislike risk. So they prefer to buy low risk assets. And the long-term bond faces the high level of the interest rate risk demand will go down. So if you see here, both factors, liquidity and interest risk, will push the short-term bonds demand to the right, and these two factors will push long-term bonds demand to the left. And then we can figure out the new price, new quantity, new price, and new quantity. So so the price of the short-term bond will go up. So which means interest rate of the short-term bond will drop. And the price of the long-term bond here in this graph indicate drop, so interest rate will up. So here you can see short-term bonds interest rate will be smaller than long-term bonds interest rate. So can we use this to explain the facts, three facts? And if you read the three facts, the slide, the fact one state interest rate on the long-term bond are usually higher than interest rate on the short-term bond. So our model here, we use the supply and demand of the bond, we actually shows this is a fact one. So the segmented market theory we derive here is able to explain the fact one. But what about fact two? Fact two say interest rate on the short-term bond are occasionally higher than interest rate on long-term bond. According to our model, we derive here, could the short-term bond interest rate higher than long-term bond? No, because the short-term bond has a high liquidity and a low interest rate risk. So short-term bond interest rate based on the segmented market theory, our model here is always smaller than long-term bonds rate. Therefore, the segmented market theory cannot explain fact 2. Cannot explain fact 2. What about fact 3? Fact 3 say the long-term bond and the short-term bond interest rate tend to move together. In this case, our model, you can see when the short-term bond rate drop, long-term bond actually increase. So these two rates will move in the opposite direction instead of the move together. So which means segmented market theory cannot explain the fact 3. So the only fact it can explain is a fact 1.